Have you ever wondered why some women choose to live alone after betrayal? No man, no noise, no more empty promises. Most people see her solitude as a sign that she's broken, that heartbreak left her too damaged to trust again. But what they don't see is what that betrayal taught her in the silence afterward. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And betrayal is the brutal teacher that strips away illusions. It makes her see who stayed only to take, who listened only to twist her truth, who promised only to betray. When trust shatters, the world tells her to heal by finding someone new, a new distraction, a new lie, a new pair of arms that feels safe just long enough to forget. But a woman who chooses to live alone after betrayal isn't hiding from love, she's learning what love truly means. Her solitude is not emptiness. It's the fortress she builds to protect the part of her that once gave everything away for nothing in return. Betrayal does more than break her heart. It cracks open the shadow she never wanted to face. It whispers the question she's tried to outrun. What if the betrayal wasn't the punishment but the lesson? What if the real danger wasn't being alone, but staying half-loved? So she stands alone now, not as a victim, but as her own sanctuary, because betrayal didn't make her cold, it made her clear. And maybe, if you listen until the end, you'll see why her solitude is not her prison but the door back to herself. She didn't choose to live alone because she gave up on love. She chose it because betrayal taught her the price of staying half-loved was always too high. There was a time when she would have done anything just to be chosen, even if it meant being lied to, even if it meant looking away when the truth sat like a stone in her chest. She thought loyalty meant forgiving what should never be forgiven. She thought love was endurance, sacrifice, bending until she forgot her own shape. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Betrayal, brutal as it is, forced her to see who she truly was, beneath the roles she played: the caretaker, the forgiver, the woman who believed that love meant carrying his secrets while burying her own. It was the lie she lived for too long, that if she just gave more, tolerated more, maybe he would stay. Maybe he would change. Maybe she would finally be enough for someone who never planned to give her the same in return. She remembers the night it broke, that final fracture, when his eyes said it all before his mouth spoke a single excuse. She knew, in that instant, that the betrayal didn't start with him. It started with her betraying herself, piece by piece, every time she silenced her knowing, every time she swallowed her truth to keep him comfortable. The shadow doesn't scream. It whispers. And it whispered to her for years. This isn't love. This is survival disguised as devotion. When the truth came out, people told her she should hate him, and maybe she did for a while, but the real anger lived deeper, aimed not at him, but at the version of herself who thought staying would save her. It never did. Betrayal was her teacher, showing her how dangerous it is to give your soul to someone who only wants to keep you half awake. So she walked away. And in that silence, she met the fortress she never knew she'd built. At first, it felt cold, empty, lonely in ways she'd avoided for so long by filling her bed with bodies and her days with distractions. But solitude has a way of turning walls into shelter. She learned that the fortress wasn't there to keep love out, it was there to keep her from giving herself to those who would only break her again. Most people look at her life now and see emptiness. They see her sitting at her kitchen table alone, her phone quiet, her nights uneventful. But they don't see the war she fought to reclaim that quiet. They don't see that every silence is now sacred, every empty space, a room she no longer fills with lies. In that stillness, she hears the truth she once ignored. She is whole, even when no one is watching. There are moments, of course, when the old ache returns, the longing to be touched, to be chosen. The shadow reminds her, you could open that door again. You could call him. You could forgive what you know would break you all over. But then she remembers, solitude is not a punishment. It's the sanctuary that betrayal carved from her old illusions. Sometimes she wonders if there's something wrong with her, if wanting to be alone means she's too wounded to try again. But then she feels the calm that betrayal left behind. She feels the certainty that comes from knowing she will never beg for a love that shrinks her. The cost is too high, the lesson too clear. She lives alone now because being alone means being true, because the fortress is not her prison, it is her vow, a vow that the next time someone asks to come in, they will not come empty-handed. They will not come with half-truths and hungry hands that take more than they give. If he ever comes, he will come whole, willing to stand in the light with her shadow, unafraid of her fortress, unthreatened by her sanctuary. And until then, she keeps her door closed. She lights a candle for her old self, the woman who thought betrayal was the end of her story. Now she knows. It was only the beginning of remembering who she's always been beneath the lies. And maybe that's what betrayal really does. It burns away the illusion that staying half-loved is better than being alone. It shows her that the silence she once feared is not empty, it's the place where she finally comes home to herself. She never planned to become the woman who lives alone. There was a time when the idea of eating dinner by herself felt like proof she was unlovable. Nights alone in bed felt like punishment, like the echo of every goodbye that left her with an empty pillow and a heart full of questions. But betrayal changed the way silence spoke to her. What once felt like abandonment now feels like sanctuary. Carl Jung wrote, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living." She didn't understand those words when she was younger. Back then, solitude felt like a prison built by her failures, proof that she wasn't good enough to be loved fully, proof that something in her must be too much, too complicated, too inconvenient. But after betrayal, she discovered that solitude is not loneliness, it's a reclamation. At first, the quiet terrified her. When you've spent years filling the void with someone else's noise, someone else's needs, someone else's betrayal disguised as love, the sudden hush feels like suffocation. She would sit in her kitchen, her phone buzzing with nothing but old echoes, and the shadow would creep in, asking, "What if this is all there is? What if no one will ever stay?" But that voice grew softer the longer she stayed with herself. She started to see that betrayal hadn't stolen love from her, it had freed her from the cheap imitation of it. The fortress she once thought was her punishment became her safe place, the sanctuary she needed to tend to the pieces of herself she'd scattered into other people's hands. Solitude wasn't the absence of love, it was the soil where real love could take root, if it ever came. People ask her if she's lonely, if she misses the warmth of a man beside her, the reassurance that someone would come home at the end of the day. They don't understand that for too long she shared her bed with men who were there in body but absent in spirit, men who left her lonelier in their presence than she ever felt in their absence. She knows now there's nothing lonelier than begging for crumbs in a room where you should have been fed whole. There's nothing colder than lying next to someone who has already left you in every way that matters. Betrayal taught her that being half-loved is worse than being alone. It showed her that silence can be the warmest blanket when your soul is finally done starving for what was never real. Some nights, the old ache tries to slip through the cracks. She still misses touch, laughter shared in the dark, the small sweetness of belonging to someone. But then she remembers the price she paid for that sweetness, the lies she swallowed, the parts of herself she hid, the boundaries she blurred just to keep him from drifting. Betrayal carved into her the truth she'd ignored. Any love that demands you abandon yourself is not love, it's a transaction. And she is done trading her wholeness for scraps. She stands at her window now, the quiet of her home like a prayer. She lights a candle for the woman she used to be, the woman who once thought she needed him to feel alive. And she thanks betrayal for its cruel mercy, because without that fracture, she might never have stopped giving herself away so easily. The mirror in her sanctuary shows her the part she once ran from. The lines on her face that speak of nights survived. The softness around her eyes that was once wiped clean by tears, now clear with a new kind of knowing. She sees herself, not as broken, but as the keeper of her own secrets, her own peace. She doesn't pretend it's always easy. There are moments when the world outside her walls whispers, "You should open the door. You should try again. You shouldn't be so hard." But she's not hard, she's clear. There's a difference. Betrayal didn't make her bitter, it made her honest. She knows what love looks like now. It doesn't come with hidden knives. It doesn't disappear when she stands in her truth. It doesn't make her shrink or beg. If it ever arrives again, it will come through the front gate. No masks, no poison, no half-promises. And until then, she chooses her sanctuary. She lets the fortress hold her. She lets solitude heal the wounds that betrayal left behind. She lets the mirror remind her she is not too much, she is just enough for herself. Maybe that's what betrayal really gave her. the courage to stop waiting for someone else to come and choose her. Because the truth is, when you live alone after betrayal, you don't just shut the door on the ones who broke you, you open the door to the part of you that was waiting to be chosen all along. And maybe, just maybe, that part of her is the only company she ever truly needed. There's a moment every woman faces when the noise finally fades. The moment she realizes her greatest fear was never being alone, but being alone with herself. For years, she'd do anything to avoid that silence. She'd pick up the phone, answer the late-night text, open the door for a man who came empty-handed but left her emptier. Anything to fill the quiet that felt like an echo of her worst doubts. But betrayal has a way of stripping away the distractions. When the lie unraveled, it took with it all the false comforts she used to wrap around her loneliness. The silence that once terrified her became a mirror she couldn't look away from. And in that mirror, her shadow waited patient, relentless, holding every truth she'd tried to bury under someone else's love. Carl Jung said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." She didn't understand that before. She thought the darkness was what he brought into her life. His secrets, his half-love, his betrayal. But the shadow showed her a harder truth. That darkness wasn't just his, it was hers, too. The places in her that believed she was easier to love if she stayed small, agreeable, forgiving. The part that chose men who mirrored her wounds instead of her worth. She remembers the first nights alone, after he left, how the walls of her sanctuary felt like they might close in on her. The fortress she built to keep the pain out also locked her inside with memories she wanted to forget. But in that stillness, the shadow whispered, "Look at me. Stop blaming him long enough to see why you let him in." So she did. She sat with every betrayal, not just his, but the ones she'd committed against herself. The times she said yes when her soul screamed no. The nights she forgave what she knew would break her again. The mornings she pretended the red flags were just shadows of her own insecurities. In that reckoning, she didn't hate herself. She held herself the way no lover ever did, honest, unflinching, unwilling to lie to keep the fantasy alive. People think healing means you become untouchable, bulletproof. But real shadow work doesn't harden you, it humbles you. It shows you that the fortress must have doors not for just anyone, but for those who come in truth, carrying their own light and darkness without asking you to hold it all for them. She knows now that boundaries are not walls meant to punish. They're the shape of her sanctuary. They're the quiet promise she makes to her shadow. I will never again betray you for the sake of being chosen. I will never again trade your voice for someone else's comfort. These days, she doesn't open the gate just because someone knocks at the right hour with sweet words and hungry eyes. She's done handing out keys to men who want a warm place to hide from their own emptiness. The fortress stands not to keep love out, but to remind her that real love is never threatened by a door that doesn't swing wide at the first knock. Sometimes people say she's become too guarded, too cold, but they don't see the warmth inside those walls. They don't see her dancing barefoot in her kitchen at midnight, candlelight flickering against old scars now healed into soft lines. They don't see her laughing at memories that once made her break. They don't hear the conversations she has with her shadow, in the dark, the parts of her she no longer silences just to be loved. She has learned the difference between walls that isolate and boundaries that protect, between solitude that nourishes and loneliness that consumes, between a man who comes to build with her and one who comes to feed on what she spent years growing in the quiet. Betrayal taught her what love is not. The shadow showed her what love must be, whole, honest, unafraid of the darkness that lives inside them both. If it ever comes again, she will know how to stand at the gate, no longer a girl desperate to be let in, but a woman strong enough to keep the wrong ones out. She doesn't fear the knock anymore. She doesn't fear the silence when no one comes. She knows now that the fortress is her promise kept, the sanctuary her rebirth, the shadow her clearest mirror. And maybe that's why she still chooses to live alone, not because betrayal ruined her, but because it revealed her. Not because she's impossible to love, but because she finally knows what kind of love is worth opening the gate for. And maybe, just maybe, that's where her real story begins. Some nights, the fortress feels too quiet, too still. She moves through her sanctuary like a ghost, touching old photos, memories that once made her ache but now only hum like distant thunder. Solitude is her choice, yet sometimes, even now, it tests her resolve. The shadow still asks, "Are you sure you want to stay alone forever?" She knows the truth. She doesn't want to be alone forever. She wants love, real love, the kind that doesn't come with hidden knives or empty promises. But betrayal taught her that longing is dangerous when you mistake it for truth. The heart can lie when it's hungry. It can whisper that any touch is better than none, that any company is safer than the silence. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And so she stands inside her fortress, staring at her own reflection in the quiet. She remembers how many times she opened this door too soon, called loneliness love, welcomed betrayal disguised as devotion. She remembers what it cost her to forget who she was just to feel chosen. So she tests herself now. When longing rises like a wave, when she wants to hear footsteps in her hallway, a warm voice beside her pillow, she doesn't run from it. She sits with it. She lets the ache say what it needs to say. You're still human. You still want to be held. She doesn't punish that part of her. She doesn't shame her shadow for craving warmth. But she knows better than to feed it with what will poison her again. This is the new ritual in her sanctuary. The longing no longer drives her out into the night to knock on doors that should stay shut. It doesn't send her scrolling through old messages, hoping he'll come back with different hands, a different heart. She knows now that the man who left wasn't the loss. The real loss would be betraying herself again just to fill this quiet with noise. There are moments when friends don't understand. They ask her why she doesn't just try again, a new app, a casual date, a man who can make her forget the one who broke her. They mean well. They don't see that she's not lonely because she's unloved. She's alone because she's finally loving herself more than the version of her that used to beg for scraps. The mirror shows her what they can't see, a woman who no longer fears the emptiness. She knows now that emptiness is a lie. There is no void when your soul is full of your own truth. There is only space for her to grow, to breathe, to listen for the knock that comes from a place of wholeness, not hunger. Sometimes she stands at her window and lets the world tempt her. The shadow whispers, "You could open the door. You could feel his arms tonight. You don't have to do this alone." And she smiles, because she knows she's strong enough now to answer, "I'd rather sleep alone than wake up next to another lie." Her fortress feels warmer now, not because the walls have come down, but because she's filled it with pieces of herself she used to give away so easily. Books half read that she now devours by candlelight. Music that plays soft as she cooks dinner for one but not lonely. Her laughter echoing off walls that once only held her tears. She sees the difference now. The woman she was then used solitude as a punishment, a shameful proof that she'd failed to keep someone. But betrayal cracked her open. It showed her that the fortress isn't where love dies. It's where the illusion of false love burns away so the real thing can be seen when it comes. She still wants that kind of love, even if she's no longer looking for it in every empty promise. She knows now it will not be born out of desperation, but from wholeness. Two people standing at the gate, neither demanding the other to fill the gaps they refuse to face. So she tends her sanctuary the way she once tended to lovers who never deserved her care. She keeps her boundaries clear, her silence sacred, her longing honest. She does not rush to fill the space just because it feels big and quiet some nights. She lets it grow around her like a garden fertile ground for the version of herself that no betrayal can break again. And maybe, on some night in a future she can't see yet, the right man will stand at her gate not as a savior but as a mirror, not to complete her, but to overflow alongside her. And if he never comes, she knows the door to herself will always be open. She will never again abandon herself just to feel less alone, because betrayal taught her that the cost of being half-loved is always too high. Solitude taught her that the price of her own soul is priceless. And the woman who chooses to live alone after betrayal is not afraid of the quiet, she is nourished by it. And maybe that's why she still stands here, with her hand on the gate, ready to open it, but only for what is true. Sometimes she stands at the gate of her fortress and wonders, if real love ever knocks, what will it look like? Will it come gentle, or will it come fierce? Will it demand the walls come down, or will it stand beside her, fortress and all? Betrayal taught her the cruel difference between being needed and being loved. She knows now that real love will not come starving. asking to be fed from the pieces she's spent years gathering back to herself. It will not appear at midnight like a ghost of her old patterns, whispering sweet distractions in the dark. It will not ask her to shrink so it can feel big. Carl Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." She knows this to be true, but she also knows not every reaction is alchemy. Some are poison, some are fire that only burns her to ash, leaving her to sweep up the charred remains of her trust once more. This time, she wants more than sparks that consume. She wants a steady flame. She wants presence, not performance. Real love, if it ever comes, will see her fortress not as a threat, but as a testament to the boundaries she fought to reclaim. It will stand at her gate, patient, curious, not picking the lock in the dark, but knocking in daylight, unafraid to be seen. She knows now. The man who tries to scale her walls with charm and promises is just another echo of betrayal. He is the shadow dressed up in new clothes, hoping she has forgotten the lesson her solitude carved into her bones. She hasn't, to her. She remembers what it cost to mistake hunger for love. She remembers how it felt to wake up beside someone who was already halfway out the door. If real love knocks, it will come whole. It will not come begging for her sanctuary to become a shelter for wounds he refuses to face. He will have done his own shadow work, sat in his own silence, built his own fortress strong enough to hold him steady. He will not look to her to mother him, fix him, or complete him. He will stand beside her, not inside her sanctuary demanding room she cannot spare. Some nights, the shadow still tests her. "What if you're asking for too much?" it whispers. "What if that kind of man doesn't exist?" And she smiles at the old fear because she knows now that the cost of settling is far greater than the cost of waiting. She would rather spend a lifetime alone in her sanctuary than ever again trade her truth for a lie. The world calls her picky, it calls her cold. It says she's built walls too high, that she'll die with no one to hold her hand. But she knows the truth. She has her own hand now. She has her own voice. She has her shadow no longer an enemy, but a reminder that every wound she ever carried was also a doorway back to herself. Real love, if it comes, will walk through that doorway on its own feet. He will not come to possess her. He will not come to fix her. He will come to witness her fortress, sanctuary, shadow, and all, and she will witness him in return. Two people who have bled enough to know that true intimacy is not about merging into one, but about standing side by side, unafraid of the places that still tremble in the dark. She dreams, sometimes, of that moment, the knock that does not come with urgency but with truth, the man who stands there with eyes that do not flinch when she shows him where she's been, what she's survived, how she lives alone, not because she cannot love, but because she will not love at the cost of herself. In that dream, she does not throw open the gate. She opens it slowly. She stands tall. She watches his hands, what they carry, what they offer, what they do not take. She listens for his silences as much as his words, because betrayal taught her that the heart does not lie, but the hunger can. And true love does not feed on hunger, it feeds on wholeness. If he never comes, she knows now that she is not waiting, she is living. She is tending the garden inside these walls. She is dancing barefoot in her sanctuary. She is choosing herself again and again. Every day the door stays closed to what would undo her. And maybe that's the real secret betrayal taught her. That when a woman chooses to live alone after betrayal, she is not closing herself off from love. She is preparing herself to recognize it when it finally arrives. And maybe, just maybe, that's how you know it's real. It doesn't come to save you from yourself. It comes because you saved yourself first. There's a quiet strength that settles in when a woman has finally made peace with her solitude. It's not the bitter silence she once feared, the one that echoed with empty promises and old betrayals. It's the kind of silence that feels like coming home to herself. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." And that is her truth now. She is not the betrayal that cracked her open. She is not the wound that bled in the dark while she begged to be seen. She is not the fortress alone, she is the sanctuary within it. She knows there will be days when her shadow tries to pull her back into the old ache, days when the emptiness feels bigger than her resolve, when she wonders if she's too much for anyone to stay. But then she remembers, she stayed for herself. She learned to sit in the silence and hear her own voice above the noise. That is the quiet revolution of a woman who chooses to live alone after betrayal, not as a punishment, but as a vow that she will never again betray herself just to feel less alone. A vow that her heart is no longer a shelter for those who come with hungry hands and hollow words. She no longer asks the world for permission to be whole. She no longer lowers her walls for anyone who demands softness before they've shown their own. If real love ever knocks, she will open the gate, not because she's desperate, but because she knows how to stand steady in her truth. And if it never comes, she is not waiting, she is living. She is dancing barefoot in the fortress she built from every lie she survived. Betrayal once made her question if she was worthy of real love. Now she knows real love must be worthy of her sanctuary. It must come with its own roots, its own courage to stand in the shadow and the light. It must come willing to become, just as she has become, not something perfect, but something honest. This is individuation, not the absence of longing, but the freedom to hold it without losing herself. It is the mirror she carries inside her fortress, showing her that she is not too much, never was, never will be. It is the shadow she no longer fights, because it taught her what she needed to see, that the cost of half-love is far greater than the quiet of a room she keeps sacred for herself. Sometimes she still dreams of him, the one who might stand at her gate one day, whole and unafraid. She smiles at that dream, but she does not cling to it. She knows she will not open her door to any love that asks her to dim the fire she spent so long tending. She will not lower her standards to be held. She would rather hold herself. And maybe that is what betrayal really gave her, the courage to become the woman she needed all along, the one who keeps her fortress strong, not to keep the world out, but to protect the sanctuary she now calls her home. So if this story felt like yours, if you have ever stood at the edge of your own shadow, wondering why betrayal broke you when maybe it was trying to set you free, remember this: you do not have to open the gate for anyone who would leave you half-loved. You do not have to trade your solitude for scraps. If these words found you at the right time, maybe they are your permission to choose you. Maybe they are your reminder that solitude is not your punishment, it's your promise kept. It's the place where real love, if it ever comes, will find you already whole. And if this story touched something inside you, a part you've been too afraid to sit with alone, share it. Not just because it might comfort another woman who is standing behind her own walls tonight, but because sometimes telling the truth out loud keeps it alive in all of us. If you felt seen here, I invite you to stay with this sanctuary. Subscribe to this channel, share these Carl Jung spoken word stories, and let them echo in the quiet corners of your heart. Here, your shadow is not your enemy, it's your teacher. Your solitude is not your cage, it's your becoming. Thank you for choosing to stand here with me, fortress, sanctuary, and all.